There's a Radiohead song that lived in shadows for over 20 years. Not buried, not forgotten, just waiting. Fans clung to shaky bootlegs and whispered set lists, passing the song around like a secret too delicate for the studio. True Love Waits wasn't just unreleased, it was a symbol of something Radiohead almost couldn't touch. A song too raw to finish, too sacred to fake. And then one day, quietly and without warning, they let it go. What emerged on A Moon-Shaped Pool wasn't the song people remembered. It was slower and sadder. It was less a plea and more an elegy. And yet, somehow it was perfect. This is the story of that song, of the decades-long struggle to capture something fleeting, and the heartbreak, the obsession, and the beauty that finally brought True Love Waits to life. Hi, I'm Andy Fenstermaker, host of Poetic Wax, a weekly music history series and podcast where I dig into the record collection I've been building since the 1990s to explore the sometimes little known or little told history of a band, album, or song from within. So, long before streaming services were a thing, there was Napster. In 2000 and 2001, you could download these peer-to-peer sharing programs and tap into a world of music. These were my early college days, and I remember becoming even more obsessed with discovering new music than I had been during my frequent visits to music stores during my high school days in the mid to late 90s. It was using Napster that I first stumbled upon Seattle indie band 764 Hero and their label mates Modest Mouse. I fell in love with the Anniversary and Sunny Day Real Estate, and I sought out live and rare tracks by bands I already knew and loved. Bands like Built to Spill fit this category, as did Radiohead. I remember stumbling upon one track in particular that literally blew me away. The emotion, just so heartfelt. It was like Fake Plastic Trees, but with a different kind of sadness. That song was True Love Waits, and I wanted more of it. On December 5, 1995, while touring for the Bends, Radiohead debuted True Love Waits in Brussels. Tom York played it softly on an acoustic guitar, joined by Johnny Greenwood, whose spare keyboard lines rose like bright, spacious echoes. From that moment, it became a whispered secret to fans, a promise carried in bootlegs and memories, even as it remained absent from studio albums for nearly 2 decades. That early version, so sparse and intimate, resonated deeply. Tom York's plea, "Don't leave, don't leave," hung in the air like a desperate prayer. Fans circulated the track on tapes with reverence, and the song became legendary precisely because it hadn't been captured in the studio, only glimpsed live occasionally, always unfinished. Tom York and his bandmates wrestled with how to give it form. It was a song that was born in longing, forged in doubt, and finally released decades later in quiet triumph. In 2001, True Love Waits finally appeared officially, but only as a live track on the EP, I Might Be Wrong, live recordings. Recorded in Oslo and appearing alone on acoustic guitar, York delivered a version that retained all of the fragility and yearning of those earlier performances. Some critics, like Pitchfork, found it absolutely gorgeous, saying it held its own against any song on OK Computer. Others didn't hold this version to any sort of esteem. Mac Randall, author of Exit Music, The Story of Radiohead, wrote that, quote, "One gets the feeling that this was a song Radiohead knew they liked and knew audiences liked, but the band never came to grips with an arrangement for it. And finally, they threw up their hands, putting it out as is." Producer Nigel Godrich also gave it a scathing rebuke in a 2012 Rolling Stone article by David Frick, stating, quote, "We tried to record it countless times, but it never worked. The irony is you have that shitty live version." To Tom's credit, he needs to feel a song has validation, that it has a reason to exist as a recording, end quote. The studio pursuit of True Love Waits spanned era after era. Sessions during OK Computer from 1997 failed to land, but a rendition of True Love Waits would appear on Minidiscs Hacked, a compilation of outtakes from the OK Computer session. Further attempts to record it seeped into the sessions for Kid A, released in 2000, and Amnesiac from 2001. Things seemed promising at first, with Ed O'Brien stating for Vulture, quote, "Each time we approach True Love Waits, we seem to be going down the same old paths. It actually sounds like the start of something exciting now," end quote. But Radiohead again abandoned the effort. An electronic version would appear from this effort on the 2021 blended release of those two albums, dubbed Kid Amnesia. York would comment about the experience in Rolling Stone. Quote, "We felt like True Love Waits was this wholesome acoustic thing, and then suddenly putting this quite fierce thing. We weren't sure if it was the right thing, so it fell by the wayside." York feared an acoustic version would feel too easy, too obvious, and the band harbored a deep need to honor the song's integrity, not just commit it to tape for the sake of completeness. In an interview with Jason Thomas Gordon for his book, The Singer's Talk, York noted that, quote, "That was one of those songs where it happened as an acoustic guitar song, and it was like, well, that's too easy. We can't do that. Because it's just on acoustic guitar and a voice. I've done that. Poor thing, it became a victim of its own simplicity." End quote. Further fragments of these sessions would later surface. The most well-known instance is the track Polk/Pole Revolving Doors, which began life as a reworking of True Love Waits material built around ghostly tape loops from the OK Computer era. About the song, Colin Greenwood stated, "We set up these tape recorders and we disabled the erase heads. We stuck the record head so it kept on recording over and over on top of itself and played keyboard notes into it to create this ghost repetition melody." End quote. That arrangement didn't stick, but it fed into other creative lines and later appeared on, once again, Kid Amnesia. Nigel shared notebook pages from the OK Computer sessions with Pitchfork in 2017, reminding the world how close they once came and yet how far they still had left to go. Before jumping into the song's successful studio recording, I want to pause very briefly for a quick moment. You can check out the transcript of this episode and more over on my Substack, as well as hear a few versions of True Love Waits and Polk/Pole Revolving Doors mentioned right here in this episode. Read it and sign up for free for future transcripts at poeticwax.substack.com. True Love Waits has always been a simple song, deceptively so. Its beauty lies in the way it says very little, yet it implies so much. From its earliest live performances, the composition was defined by restraint. Got a handful of chords, a fragile melody, and lyrics that walk the tightrope between romantic devotion and emotional collapse. The original arrangements were skeletal. Just Tom York and an acoustic guitar, or occasionally a Rhodes electric piano. There was no rhythm section, no orchestral movement. Everything existed in negative space. The chords cycled in soft repetition, like a lullaby stuck mid-dream, while York's voice floated just above, raw, unsure, exposed. This wasn't a song constructed around technical flourishes or structural ambition. It lived on vulnerability, on the silence between words. York's voicing and fingerings created subtle dissonance. The emotional tension didn't come from complexity, it came from imbalance, from the sense that at any moment it could completely fall apart. That felt appropriate. The song isn't polished, it's aching. And the lyrics, "Just don't leave," sit at the center of a blinking red light. York returns to them again and again, as if saying them more times might change something. It's obsessive, repetitive, but that repetition is the point. The song captures the kind of desperation that doesn't grow or resolve, just lingers. But when True Love Waits finally appeared on A Moon-Shaped Pool in 2016, its composition had shifted entirely. Gone was the guitar, in its place a stark looping piano phrase. The piano didn't play chords in the traditional sense. It cycles through broken fragments, arpeggios that overlap and phase out of sync with themselves, never quite lining up. The result is disorienting, like a memory you can't fully grasp. The melodic center never settles, it just drifts. It's not a ballad, it's meditation. The piano part, composed and performed by Johnny Greenwood, is minimalist in design but rich in emotional texture. Each note decays into the next, creating a sense of slow motion movement, a carousel turning just a beat too slow. The rhythm is desirably unstable. You feel like the ground is subtly shifting underfoot. That instability becomes a musical metaphor for everything the song is trying to say. Love is uncertain. Waiting is painful. Time is unkind. The arrangement evolves so gently you might miss it. Ambient textures emerge like shadows, a soft bass swell, a haze of reverb, a string line barely audible. The tension doesn't come from dynamics, it comes from stasis. The song becomes a space to sit with the unbearable. And York's vocal performance, low, cracked, almost whispered. It feels miles away from the urgency of earlier versions. He doesn't sound like he's pleading anymore. He sounds like he's remembering. The way he sings Don't Leave now carries weight, not just as a request, but as resignation. It's not a demand, it's a lament. The lyrics haven't changed, but their meaning has. I'll drown my beliefs to have your babies. It once sounded like a wild promise from a man desperate to keep someone close. On a moon-shaped pool, it feels like a line drawn from the ashes. The voice singing it has already lived through the consequences. He knows what he's lost. The song is no longer about keeping love, it's about bearing its absence. What makes the 2016 version so arresting is how fully it abandons the idea of a traditional arrangement. There's no verse, chorus, verse, no escalation, just a spiral. The looping piano becomes a kind of emotional architecture, a repetition that both soothes and suffocates. The song ends as it begins, still in motion, still unresolved. In many ways, the final composition of True Love Waits is less a rewriting and more a reframing. It takes the same melodic and lyrical material, but alters the delivery so completely that the emotional message shifts. The acoustic versions were young and trembling. The studio version is old and hollowed out. It's still the same house, just empty now. Where the early compositions reached outward, the 2016 version turns inward, and in doing so, it becomes something rare, a song that hasn't just been recorded, it's been lived. 2 decades is a long time to hold a song like this to your chest. For fans, True Love Waits existed almost as a myth. Live clips circulated freely, emotional energy built up and released, expectations mounted and then let go. For the band, it was a pilgrimage they refused to shortcut. Many studio attempts, endless reconsideration, yet when they finally committed, the result felt earned, stripped down yet richly textured, vulnerable yet transformed. In the singer's talk, York elaborated on why it took so long. Quote, "One of my mistakes is dismissing things because they're simple." Producer Nigel Godrich, more so than the others, would say to me, "You're making a mistake because you want to see something in it that's not there, so stop fucking around and change it." Things have fallen by the wayside that shouldn't have for that reason, because I'd had some sort of belligerent agenda which can smother a song and refuse to let it grow. True Love Waits was a bit like that. It was one of those things where it was almost made to be at the end of a show. It wasn't even necessarily made to be recorded. It was made to say, "Okay guys, good night. Thanks." The early acoustic versions existed to bleed yearning. The final piano version exists to acknowledge how restless waiting carves into us, reshaping our capacity to love and our fear of losing it. York's voice on the studio take is not youthful pleading, but weary philosophy. Love doesn't burn fast. It waits. It haunts. It survives. In the pantheon of songs that took time to find their voice, Radiohead's True Love Waits stands tall and patient with artistic conviction and the quiet power of emotional restraint. Its legacy isn't only in its haunting final form, but in the long journey that gave it depth. Spanning 2 decades of silence, and experimentation, the band resisted the temptation to force a resolution, and in doing so, they allowed the song to age alongside them. When it finally emerged, it carried the ache of longing and the clarity of experience. The weight wasn't just part of the story, it was the story. And in the end, the weight made it better. The weight made it real. The weight made it worth it.